quickly. Settle down.
In 1946, General Roy S. Geiger observed the atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. As he watched the mothball fleet being crushed by a single bomb, he instantly recognized that atomic weapons could render amphibious landings difficult. No dense concentrations of troops, ships, and material at the beachhead would be able to withstand the power of the atom. As Commandant of the Marine Corps, he convened a special board which recommended that the Marine Corps develop transport helicopters to attack on enemy shores. An experimental helicopter squadron was commissioned on December 1, 1947, and based in Marine Corps Air Station Quantico, Virginia. The helicopters assigned to this unit were the Sikorsky HO-3S1 and the Piasecki HRP-1. These were not the Marines' first experiments with helicopters. The Corps had a decade earlier tested and rejected as unsuitable the Pitcairn OP-1 autogyro. The autogyro was a hybrid aircraft with a four-blade rotor. The Army bought its first helicopter, a Vought Sikorsky XR-4, on January 10, 1941, and operated a few improved models of that aircraft in Europe and Asia during the later stages of World War II. The first real test of the helicopter on the battlefield would not come until 1950, in a little police action called Korea. When North Korean forces invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950, 4 HO-3S1 helicopters and 37 Marines were transferred to Korea aboard the escort carrier Baedong Strait. The squadron's 4 helicopters and 8 Stinson OY-1 fixed-wing spotter planes flew into the Pusan perimeter on August 2nd. While United Nations forces struggled to hold on to the Pusan perimeter in the late summer of 1950, the U.S. 1st Provisional Marine Brigade was rushed into action to reinforce U.S. Army and Republic of Korea ROK troops defending that precarious pocket. Brigade Commander Brigadier General Edward A. Craig knew little about the terrain his Marines would have to cross, so he climbed into a Sikorsky HO-3S1 helicopter and lifted off to scout the route, give directions to the lead battalion, and pick a spot for his command post. That crucial trip aboard a Marine chopper on August 3, 1950, was a harbinger of the increasingly vital role rotary wing aircraft would play in 3 years of tough fighting in Korea. The helicopters added pilot rescue to their duties on August 3rd, when the HO-3S carrying Craig diverted to pick up a Marine Vought F-4U-4 Corsair pilot who had been shot down during a close air support mission. Marine choppers would assume that role scores of times in the coming months. Equipped with only the most basic instruments, the helicopters were not actually certified for night flying, but with so many lives at stake, Marines soon found themselves evacuating casualties after sundown. In the end, chopper crews would conduct hundreds of dangerous nighttime Medevac missions. The choppers played key roles during the Marines' advance to the Chosin Reservoir and their fighting withdrawal from the massive Chinese offensive, maintaining contact among the widely separated units. They also continued flying medical supplies and critical material in and carrying casualties out of small landing spots in the narrow valleys of North Korea. Early in 1951, Army helicopters also began to fly medevac missions, sparing seriously wounded soldiers, punishing ambulance trips over Korea's wretched roads. Between their rescues of downed airmen and isolated ground troops and flying ambulance missions, U.S. helicopters were credited with saving tens of thousands of lives during the war. On the basis of his experiences in Korea, 8th Army Commander Lieutenant General Maxwell Taylor said, "The helicopter employed en masse can extend the tactical mobility of our fighting forces far beyond its normal capability. I hope that the United States military will make ample provisions for the full exploitation of the helicopter in the future." A decade later, when the United States went to war again in Vietnam, helicopters had made the transition from useful novelty to a symbol of the American way of fighting. In the early years of the U.S. military's involvement in Vietnam, even before the first ground force had landed, America's top military commanders were haunted by what had happened to the last great Western Army to fight there. Hiding in the jungles and staying on the move, the Viet Minh outmaneuvered and outfought the French. They had an almost supernatural ability to appear out of nowhere, strike quickly and hard, and disappear into the countryside again. The American planners knew that, like the French, they would find their superior technology and strength reduced, if not canceled out altogether, by the thick jungle and bad roads. The answer came from the Marines' experience in Korea. There, the helicopter had proven a quick and reliable way to transport men in and wounded out of a combat area. Its speed and maneuverability suggested a new kind of use for a new kind of war. As America began to funnel troops into Vietnam, the groundwork for this kind of war was put in place.
Every division, every combat unit of the United States Army, Marines, and the Navy was given an AO, an area of operation, that we had general freedom of movement. It was a relatively unsophisticated army in the South. These were black pajamas and pith helmets and rusty rifles from the French, when they were there. In the North, no. They had artillery, they had mobility, they had discipline, they wore uniforms, they would stand and fight. And they had a logistical base. It was right across the border. I mean, they didn't have to go far to get it. Plus, they could shoot at us from across the border.
The enemy was all around the Marines and I Corps. The Leathernecks had their hands full. To counter this Red Force, the Marines prepared to go to war by air.
We now had to think from 2.5 miles an hour, the walking speed of the foot soldier, 2.5 miles an hour, to 80 knots an hour, 80 knots, 100 miles an hour. All of the artillery that was allocated to the division, traditionally, the 105s, the 155s, we now could airlift it. We didn't have to shoot from the sea. We could go in and shoot. We could take them in, put them in at 8 o'clock in the morning, let them shoot up 1,000 rounds, and extract them before lunch.
In Vietnam, the Marines would put the theory of air mobile to test. Korea proved the practicality of evacuation by helicopter, direct from combat zones to medical facilities. In a matter of hours, a casualty could be in a long-range transport aircraft, fully staffed with trained medical personnel, for a swift trip to major medical centers in Japan, or even the United States. A whole new concept of casualty evacuation was born. The war in Vietnam was fought against the deadly combination of a hostile environment and an elusive enemy. The long, narrow, mountainous country, covered with jungle and brush, crisscrossed by rivers and streams, and drenched by summer and winter monsoons, provided natural hideouts for Viet Cong guerrillas. The battles had no fixed fronts. The adversary knew no fixed rules. To deal with the enemy, U.S. soldiers first had to find him. They had to look through the tall grass, across the unspanned rivers, into the dense jungle, and were constantly facing hidden dangers, a booby trap, a buried mine, a sniper, a sudden ambush. From the moment a soldier was hit, no time was lost before the Dustoff call went out. The Dustoff call sign was acquired by the Medevac units in Vietnam in January 1964, ironically and quite appropriately by way of medical necessity. The occasion was a bloody two-day operation west of Saigon, near the Cambodian border in early January of 1964. At the time, all combat units utilized randomly selected call signs controlled by the Navy Support Activity Vietnam. They were changed periodically in accordance with signal operating instructions in the interest of security. The call sign of 57th Med Detachment on that day happened to be Dustoff. Fighting was heavy, casualties were mounting, evacs were continuous, and communication between the evac helicopters and ground commanders was overwhelming. At the time the code changeover was ordered to occur, the major ground commander, as well as the Medevac air crews, became concerned that due to the battlefield chaos, switching to a new call sign might jeopardize evacuation. At the request of the ground commander, the 57th Med Commander agreed immediately to delay the call sign changeover. After the operation, it was decided that a permanent aeromedical evacuation call sign would help avoid possible future mission impairment. Within a few days, official approval was received for the permanent call sign change to Dustoff. Time has always been an enemy for men wounded in combat. In Vietnam, this race against time was partly won by the helicopter and by advances in treatment. It was the men and women of the medical services that carried the crucial burden in the wounded soldiers' fight for life. The Medevac pilots were a rare breed with an absolute love of flying.
I loved aviation, I guess, since I was a little kid. For some reason, I knew that I had a fascination with flying machines, and I really never planned on flying helicopters. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Jack would get his chance for air combat in Vietnam, not as a fighter pilot, and not taking lives, but saving them.
Most of the guys I flew with had been there before, so I'm flying with second tour boys that were very, very good at what they did and showed you how to do things with that UH-1 that was not taught to you in flight school. I remember one captain telling me, he said, "You're probably not going to make it out of here alive, but listen to what I have to tell you, and let me show you how to do this, and maybe you'll have a better chance at it." So that was a real sobering speech this guy made before we climbed into the cockpit, and I was all ears and eyes. Basically, yes or no, sir, show me what you have so I can stay alive. And lessons well learned, which you pass on again to somebody else as they come on board.
From the moment a soldier was hit, no time was lost. The burden of an extra minute could break the thin thread of life. The fights for life began with the Navy corpsmen who served with the Marine combat units. Even in the middle of the fight, the corpsmen were there to give first aid to the fallen soldier. While giving whatever medical help they could offer in the field, the corpsmen would order the radio operator to call for a Dustoff.
This is Raider Alpha 6. I have an urgent Dustoff mission. Coordinates presently insecure. Have gunships in the area.
That call would help send the medevacs racing to the aid of the Marines. The average flight time from the LZ pickup to any well-staffed and equipped medical facility was 1 hour or less.
to this day, I can hear a Huey. I mean, it's a very distinct sound, and that's what the Dustoff pilots used. And I must say I give all the credit in the world. My heroes of Vietnam are the combat medics and the Dustoff pilots, because they saved so many lives just by putting a chopper down in a place where no one thought they could ever put a chopper, and getting those victims on that chopper and getting them to the hospitals as quickly as they did.
The Medevac helicopters lifted off to beat the clock when a young Marine's life hung in the balance. But they did not go into harm's way alone.
And every time we took off on a Medevac, we had a Huey gunship that supported us. And they flew behind us when we went out. As soon as we took off, they took off behind us. And in case we needed help, we would call and tell them where the enemy was shooting at us from, and so forth like that.
Sometimes the extra firepower was not enough to protect the unarmed Dustoff.
I think my first experience with Medevac was up in Icor in the mountains, and I pulled some night Medevac in the mountains, and that's hairy.
Night flying in the days before night vision was not for the faint of heart.
We had not only daylight missions with the helicopters, but we had night missions. We would fly 2 helicopters at night, Medevac, every night. There'd be 2 helicopters be set aside that would be going out and flying night missions, and they called you any time of the night or day if you were on Medevac. You worked a complete 24-hour shift.
Night mountain flying without much illumination, unless you know the area of operation real well, will get you killed because you're flying around mountains and stuff like that. But we had people that were hit. They had a fire base under a mortar attack, and they scrambled myself and another chief warrant officer. And he'd been there before, although I did most of the flying. And we had to go into a saddle between 2 artillery batteries where we had to pick up the wounded. And it was dark, and we landed to a strobe light. Basically what they do is they put a little light that would blink, and you land to that.
A night landing at a mountain base under enemy fire was a challenge for even a veteran pilot. For Jack Teesing, this was a very dangerous time to be receiving on-the-job training.
And I remember making the approach, and although we turned off all our lights, I think I hit the landing light really quickly just before I touched down to see where I was landing, and shut it off. I don't think the mortar attack was up more than a minute, maybe 2, before we went in. And I remember sitting there between the saddle, waiting for them to bring the wounded down, and we were at full RPM thinking they're going to drop one right down on these blades. I mean, I'm not going to make it out of here, and just praying they're not going to hit us again.
We were getting battled pretty bad, really bad one night. Just soldiers getting killed left and right, and we had helicopters keep coming in. And Ghost Rider was the one guy's name. He didn't care. He wasn't a Medevac, but he was going to come in and he was going to get my people. And he came in 4 different times to come in and get my people. And the last time I was wounded, I didn't know it at the time, and he got hit.
The flashing light was certain to draw the attention of the enemy gunners.
Knowing they saw the landing light come on, and knowing they were reloading the mortar tubes, and I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this for a living, but if I ever get out of this alive, I will go to church every Sunday, and you're making all kinds of pacts with God to see if you can get through this. And all of a sudden you look up, and here they come running down with the stretchers and the guys with the bottles in them, and you put them on board, and you grab a handful of pitch, and you're out of here thinking, oh man, how did I get through this one?
Just as the wounded soldier was placed on the Huey, all hell broke loose. The chopper began to lift off. Teesing was lucky, but his co-pilot was not.
The bullets came through the cockpit, and I thought they went underneath his chicken plate, and he slumped over on the controls.
There was also extensive damage to the ship.
Little did I know I had battle damage in the tail rotor section. Well, I had another ship come up, and I said I was hit, and another ship come up, looked me over, and I wasn't leaking any fluid, so I looked down and said everything was in the green.
Teesing was now facing a situation that his training never covered.
When it was going on, I just remember saying to myself, I know I'm going to die, but I'm very busy. I remember saying that. And the tower kept screaming, what was the matter? And I didn't have time to talk to him. I had an airplane that was totally out of control, and you know, it was kind of an instantaneous course on how to fly an aircraft out of control. They didn't cover that in flight school, by the way.
Teesing had the presence of mind to radio the hospital.
You hear the radio, it's Dustoff. Dustoff is calling our hospital and telling us where they are, how many casualties they got, what kind they are, and how far away they are, what their, ETA 4 minutes or whatever, and what kind of injuries they have, so we know what to get the doctor, the triage officer ready.
And we went to the hospital area, and there was already a helicopter on the pad, and I chose not to land there. There was 2-story buildings all around the helipad there at the hospital.
Our hospital was on a bluff about 85 feet high, overlooking the South China Sea, and the helipad was right outside the door to the emergency room, so that when the helicopters started coming in, the wind, of course, from the propellers just blew right through the emergency room, and you could hear them. To this day, I can hear a Huey.
With a wounded ship and another bird on the pad, Teesing had to find some place to set the Huey and his wounded Marine down.
You hear that Huey coming, whether you're on duty or not, you hear it coming, and the first thing you do is run to the emergency room to see, if you're not on duty, to see if they need extra help, or how many casualties do they have coming. And you stand at the door and you watch the chopper land, and the medics run out. Whoever's available runs out to the chopper to start bringing the gurneys in.
So I decided to land over a ditch, and of course this kid still slumped over the controls, and there was nobody on board with me and the crew. And we got down to bottom, and I don't know what snapped back there, but I lost my tail rotor. I don't know whether I lost the shaft or the control. I had no idea. There was no way of knowing. And she started to spin out of the control. Well, I couldn't do a hovering out of rotation because I was over a ditch and I was next to the hospital. And if I'd have rolled this thing in a ball, I'd have killed everybody in the hospital. So I opted to go back in the air.
As Teesing tried to get some air under his ship, the wounded helicopter began to fight back.
And at this time, the airplane's going out of control, going round and round, and I'm trying to learn how to fly a helicopter without the tail rotor controls, and it's quite an interesting experience. And the guy next to me who decides to wake up and get out of controls with me, which is a no-no. And we went round and round, and finally I landed the aircraft, and right there at the hospital area, where I wasn't going to land in the first place, and they took him into the hospital, and I shut the aircraft down and got out and sat down and couldn't get up.
With his wounded Marine in the hands of the medical team, the impact of what had just happened left Teesing paralyzed.
I remember a bunch of guys from the area came over and wanted to talk to me. I just could not stand up. They had to help me up. And I guess that was the worst I ever physically felt as far as being afraid. And I can't remember how long that was. It might have been 10 minutes. It might have been a half hour. I know I finally obviously did get up, but I was pretty afraid.
Every day, several times a day, for 13 long months or until they were killed, the Medevac pilots flew their missions of mercy.
During my time in Vietnam, I was there 13 months, and I flew something over 1,300 hours of flight time. So I had a lot of long, busy days.